Hello, everyone. This is Ray Newman's. I'm the Q, and the answer is Wade J. Carey. This is the Flaming Sword Publications Farewell, My King podcast. And today is the path to self-publishing. So we're going to take a little journey with Wade today and open up the forum and let him tell us how all this happened. And of course, Q always has to do the intro, meaning you got to come find us. Okay, so the best way to find us, I have it up here on the screen, is wadejcarey.com. That's our website. The Facebook page, facebook.com/Wade J. Carey author. And then we have let me get this out of the way. Oh, there we go. I done messed this up, Wade. Well, I'll just go back to us. But, you can find us on Spotify. But this is the heart of the ministry right here. You can see this is where we give off once a Friday. Fridays out of every month, we give away a book. And this is the behind the scenes, the accountings corner, usually on Thursday nights. And I did, and whoever that guy is throwing the bass guitar, so that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to get into exactly where this all started, how, of course, Wally Wednesday. If I have to give just a shameless plug to the Facebook page, if you only come on Wednesday to figure out what this energetic and very poetic dog is doing all the time, I would say it would be worth your weight in gold to do this. So he's got a voice of his own. Of course, he likes sharing his dad's stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and we are going to go after this. Am I muted? No, we're good.
I can hear you.
Okay. So the road or the path to self-publishing is something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to when it comes down to, they see someone that's published a book and they just say, well, they've got some, talent or an agent sitting in the backyard, ready to do this. But we have 9 books published under your ministry, under your author and your pen. And I don't personally, I've rode with you in this since 2014, so I know what it takes for you to do this. But let's tell everyone, starting at block 1, how did this all start? Where did the book concepts come from? Or the first book, when you decided to start rolling that out? And then take us through the trials and tribulations. I know you had some dealings with Cross Books, and then you went on to the Amazon self-publishing. Man, I'm just going to open the mic to you, and you give us the A to Z of how you got into this self-publishing world.
Sure, Ray. Well, I appreciate that. Let's just kind of start at the beginning and start with the big picture, because that's how it's best to I think to explain things. It all started back in really goes back, oh gosh, many years, when I took my first trip to Seattle on a business trip. Just kind of fell in love with the place, and took many leisure and business trips out there, over the years, mostly leisure. And came back from a family vacation in 2009, and I had this idea of a short story, because the Pike Place market is such a beautiful old market, and it just reminds me of some old markets I went to when I was a kid. And so I had this short story in mind of, what would it be like to kind of walk through this place? Because, I'm an early riser, so I would, get up and leave the hotel and go up to the market, even before my wife would get up, and go get a coffee. And the whole market would be waking up, and it was a quiet place, but you knew this great commerce was about to happen later and all that. So I just kind of fell in love with the place. And so I pictured, what would it be like to be kind of walking through this market, just having a chat with God, me and God kind of walking through. Everybody would want to think about doing something like that. If God is real, wouldn't it be nice to sit and talk to him and ask him questions? So that had been percolating in the back of my mind for a number of years as a short story. And so we got back in 2009 from early June trip there, and it just started to galvanize more into the a novel. And so I had this spreadsheet of scripture passages I liked, and I had this idea for a short story. And I'll never forget, it was July 4th. We're coming up on the 14th year anniversary. I just felt this call, and that's really what I want a big picture is. Look, I'm a business development manager in the trucking and logistics business. Been in the business for 41 years, and I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life. One might say I've had more failures than successes, but always get back up and claw ahead in life, and that's what we have to do. It has to do with perseverance, which I'll circle back to in a little bit. But so the combination of this idea and the whole publishing industry was changing around that time, around 2008, 2009, into self-publishing. And what it was a thing called print on demand, where instead of in the old days, you would try to write a manuscript and sell it to a publisher. I'll never forget reading the time that a couple dozen times, to me, who I think is the greatest novelist of all time, John Grisham, he got turned down by many, many publishing houses. And it goes into something I've talked about with some other colleagues. The publishing industry lacks vision. They just, they look behind and they look at what's going on. They can't see ahead, and as we know biblically, people perish without vision. So anyway, so all these things started to come together, and really the print on demand were basically, it came along in a technology to where if somebody orders a book on Amazon, they can print one, or if they order 5, they can print 5. In the old days, you have to sell your manuscript to a publishing house, and then they'd have to print 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it would be, and there was a lot of this cost involved in it. Well, print on demand came along and started opening up where people could, quote, self-publish. And now, as I understand it, there are more self-published authors today than there are traditionally published. So, this started coming along, and I know God was directing it. And what I want to share, with everyone now is God often will take, regular schmucks and ask them to do things for him. And it's not necessarily because of their ability. It has to do with their availability. And so he grabbed me, working years in the trucking business, and going to church and studying theology, and just kind of early in my stages of my faith starting to take off. And all this came together, and I'll never forget, I had some friends over for 4th of July cookout. And in fact, one of my oldest friends, dearest friends, he's really more like a brother to Johnny Ketchum. And I told him, I said, well, I kind of feel this pull to write this book. It's not anything I've ever wanted to do. And I'll never forget, he grabbed me and he prayed over me, because he could see, he felt like God was doing something, And so, again, that was July 4th of 2009. So I just kind of started forward. So I had this spreadsheet of scriptures that I liked, and I had this opportunity through self-publishing with the new technology, and just started forward. I mean, I'll never forget writing the first couple of paragraphs into a Word document, which I barely knew how to use, and just starting forward, sort of like getting thrown in the middle of the lake. And so here's an unqualified guy who never wanted to write books, feeling a calling. And that's really the main thing I wanted to share, is that, sometimes, like, if you have a natural talent, like you can sing, God's going to use that. But other times he's going to call us to do something that might not seem to be 100% in our wheelhouse. And so, we have to, develop it, because my goal is not writing books, because I don't love it. My goal is to share the wonders of the Christian faith and the hope is provided through what Jesus did for us at Calvary, and do it in a way that kind of excludes man-made religion, kind of an unvarnished look at who is this God who created us, and why did he send Christ to die for us. and really concentrate on the big picture, but do it through a story. So, so I've got all these, factors going on and just kind of started into it. I always believe, and I'll use some nice terminology here. I think things in life sometimes call for us to have more guts than brains. And that's really what happened here. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know the end of the story. I just started writing. In fact, when I look back on my notes, the chapters, I mean, I just started writing ideas down in this old composition book and just started in and was developing it as it went along, and then finally figured it out, by the end. So from July 4th to the following January in 2010, 6.5 months, I went from, nothing, in a spreadsheet and nothing in a Word doc to a printed book. So I'll stop there. That's just kind of the genesis of how it happened.
Do you have one of them the books that you write your notes in close to you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got stacks of them.
Well, hold one up. I want everyone that's watching this on video to see that 9 novels started right there. There you go. We've got it. So it was what, a 99-cent memo book, or maybe $1? Yeah.
Yes.
And it was taken from a concept into this note-taking device that you've carried to many meetings with me, when we would meet for coffee in Starbucks and Jefferson at Kroger. Boy, we've given a lot of, I guess you could say, we've given the gospel to a lot of people indirectly, sitting in that location.
Right. Right.
I want to touch on one thing, and it's one thing that you're probably not going to say for yourself, is that we're not talking about someone who labored over this for 6 or 7 months. It wasn't like, okay, well, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to go thinky and planny, and I'm just going to sit here and be in love with the concept. No, you fell in love with doing. And I will fast forward us to me and you were sitting, which is no longer a Sonny's in Athens. And, God had put it on my heart. It was a lot more difficult conversation for me than it was for you, because of the way your books and what you talk about, and you always go after a certain topic. But I brought the budgeting book concept to you, and I want everyone to listen. And this is something that I hope you can just be here with us just for a few seconds, because I know it's hard to not multitask. But from that meeting, less than 50 days later, there was a published budgeting book completed. So while it is really easy to just walk over this, now this is a full-time job, 40 plus hours a week in the trucking industry. Me and you spent at least, a few hours together every week, church responsibility, life group responsibilities. So this was carved out of 5 o'clock in the mornings or 10 o'clock at night's time. This was what today's culture would call a side hustle, but for the kingdom, for the words of what Christ has poured into your heart. And, the budgeting book is very dear to me. I think the heart of budgeting is something that's been, completely overlooked. It's more mechanical, and a lot of people feel money instead of have money.
Right.
So my question to you is, okay, and this is, I think a lot of people want to ask this question, but they don't know how. How? I mean, how? We understand the surface and but how did you lock in so tightly into such? I mean, because some of these novels and some of these books you've done under 50 days or under 60 days to print, from concept to print. What does that take on a day-to-day, minute to minute? And because every ministry has sacrifice, and I think this is
Right.
what's missing here. Let's talk about the sacrifice that you've made to get to this point right now.
All right. Well, there's obviously a lot more, and we're going to, in some subsequent podcasts, go through each of the books because each had a different process and timeline. Some of the details. I mean, it kind of set what I believe will be our next podcast on A Walk Through the Market, my first book. I've kind of set the table for that, and we'll start to draw out some of the details because it was a fascinating process. By the time I got to the budgeting book in 2017, as you know, I just finished writing my 6th novel, and I'll tell those who are watching or listening, we're sitting at lunch, and I'm getting ready to go to Birmingham on a business trip for the night, and how much I put into doing these novels and all that, and so I'm sitting here, and those of you who don't know, Ray's background, he was 14 years in the military. The first part, he was in the Marines. He did, Iraq and this kind of stuff. So you're not dealing with, you're dealing with a manly man. And so he sat there nervous, sweating, because he knew he had to sit down with his friend and say, look, I know you just finished this book and you're getting ready to publish and editing and all that, but I need you to write this budgeting book.
Well, and the story behind that is I was the one telling you to slow down.
Yeah, you were telling me to slow down, and he drops this on me. But it leads to the good point. Going back to the genesis of A Walk Through the Market and everything that happened after that is God, prepares my heart for certain things, and He's involved in this to the point where it's very personal. Why else would a guy who's got a family and job responsibilities and all of this other stuff, why would I pop up at 5:30 in the morning to write for 2.5 hours before I started work, and then finish the day at 10:30, 11 at night, bleary eyed, trying to finish up a chapter, and it's to serve my King. It's to fulfill the calling that He gives me, even if it's sometimes painful, because being a son or daughter in the kingdom requires sacrifice. That's the whole thing about sacrificial or agape love is, anything worth loving or having, it can't be based on mere feelings. There's got to be something substantial, and that's what the sacrifice is. So, going back to the budgeting book, God had prepared my heart. I had talked to another dear friend and actually business colleague who is, has her own ministry, Roxanne Shunk. Rock and I had a couple of months before our lunch prepared me about the budgeting by talking about the concept, because she knows that, handling money and that kind of stuff is something I've had to learn how to do. So God started to prepare me. And so when you sat down, even though you might have thought, well, boy, he's going to, call me names for suggesting, writing a 7th book on top of the 6th one, he had already prepared me. So I remember texting you the next day, here's the name of it. And 2 days later, I had all the chapters written down and added one later on. So God had prepared me for it. And I think I wrote it in 45 days or 48 days. And I took my time editing because it was the first book I had done that was first person. The first 6 were novels, which is telling the story. And so I'm narrating. This one was I'm speaking with my own voice. So I took several months to take my time to edit and augment and things like that. But, sometimes the process goes quickly. Like my 4th book, Garden of Life, I took 2 weeks to script it out and 40 days to write it. And then, of course, several months of editing and the production stuff, because here's the thing. My first 4 books I did produce through a company. It was Cross Books. They, had they were part of the Lifeway Christian Resources Group, and they had started, and I latched on with them with my first book in the self-publishing, like I was talking about, back in 2009. They had just launched a few months before, so I'm jumping in the well. They ended up shutting down in 2015, and so that created, a time of question where I didn't know what God was really doing until He spoke, and then, went on. But so for those who are potential authors out there, just want to make a few comments on that. First off, the process is enormously time consuming. And if you say, well, I've been talking about writing a book, get prepared, because if you want to do it right, between writing it, which is the easy part, and then the editing and production part, you know, that takes a level of commitment that you're going to have to give something up to do it. You're not going to be able to get away with it. Now, if you're independently wealthy and you don't have to work, then that's great. But if you're like most of us and have to work a job, you're going to have to eat into your leisure time. You're going to have to, you know, eat into your personal time. You're going to have to sacrifice if you want to do it. So it can be done. You know, if just a, you know, a regular working schmuck like me can, you know, produce, you know, 10 publications over the last 14 years. And really, it's not just the 10, because that first book, A Walk Through the Market, I made so many mistakes, grammatical and editing and just structure. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I've written, rewritten, republished the book 5 times. And my second book, I only did twice because I got a little bit better. And everything from my third book through the 10th, one shot, because I slowed it down and started to understand what I was doing, and you know, gain some awareness and things like that. So anything, like I said, for God's kingdom, anything that's worthy is going to take some sacrifice, and it's going to take a lot of perseverance, but it forges character as you go along, because when you start something and you stick to it and then you finish it, the feeling of satisfaction is pretty tremendous.
You know, I think what people need to hear also is that not every ministry standing up in front of a congregation at a pulpit. We are all called to do different things, and them different things have just as much meaning. And the Bible's very clear is that the members of the body are important. I mean, what can the hand do without the fingers? What can the eye do without the eyelid? You know, so we all
Right.
have a role in this. And I think, especially when it comes to Christian publishing, the market is so saturated with almost fairy tales when it comes to love and marriage and just the realistic value of what life is. It's so disconnected that it's almost considered fantasy. And
Right.
you know, I know that you took a less fantasy side, but there is some fantasy there, you know, because the late night breakfast, and we are going to go through every one of these books. So everyone just buckle your seatbelt up. The next 9 sessions that we do, unless we get a hot topic that we want to go after, we're going to take each book from the beginning to the end. Wade's going to talk about production, and we're just going to, you know, give you the insider trade of what this book's about and the reason why we've done it. So I would
Right.
like to put part of my story into this, is because me and Wade met at our local church, and uh you know, we were doing different life groups, and we ended up joining the same life group, and it was ran out of my house. And man, we went for what, 4 years, 4 or 5 years, you know, every Thursday night. We were very, very, very structured in that during some of these writings of the books. But I came into relationship, me and you actually met right after Garden. And there was parts of that book that was very, very pointed towards me. And, you know, we'll get into that sometime. Um,
Right.
I volunteered myself to help Wade on another side of his ministry, which is his social media. Um, a lot of these concepts we come to together, but in structuring how we do it is that the Facebook page is something that, on top of, you know, being a regional manager with a trunking company, you know, having a life and writing all these books, um, it just, the wick was burnt, you know, when it came down to it. And so I took it over at the first of this year, and started, you know, putting some consistency to that, because we just wanted to get the word out. And this is the reason why now we're starting the podcast and the YouTube pages. It's not that we have something new. It's that these conversations, me and Wade said this 100 times, is that these conversations me and him have weekly, or sometimes a few times a day. and we don't share them because we just never got into this place where we could share them. But now we're there.
Right.
So with the podcast and this also being on YouTube and then the Facebook page, we're trying to communicate Wade's message and our ministry, and that's I think where some of the pieces got missing, is that you put all this effort. So I want to talk from the side of that you can publish a book and no one will buy it unless you show people what this book is about and that it's available. And then sometimes that still won't happen, is that sometimes, our ministry effects is more giving. Wade's probably, I know for a fact, giving away so many copies of his book that it's unreal. And I'll say books. And I know I've bought some. I've got some on my counter. I go to little libraries and put them out as almost like a big gospel message, to people. But as we're kind of crunching in on time here, I want everyone to hear this, is that self-publishing is not easy, but you need your network to help you. If I know sometimes it's hard doing business with people that but if you're a reader, this message is for you. This is a man that that has spent a lot of time in his room that he's sitting in right now putting together a book. And I probably put about 15 hours a month into social media and trying to make sure that all this stuff kind of has a flow to it so we can get the attraction of the population, because there's not many true, biblically based novels that end up on the New York Times bestseller. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more
That's
self-help or shelf help, because self-help not read is shelf help, So in the last few minutes, Wade, when and why do you feel, so listen, I'm trying to put this so we don't point fingers, but uh, who's your target market?
boy, that's a great question. I've often said that I wish that I could take the books that I've written now and give them to me when I was 12 years old. I didn't understand, I always, had been a believer, but didn't really understand what that meant and the ramifications of it. And religion kind of stood in my way. There's a lot of people who have been hurt by religion, man-made religion, that is. And I think unless you're a really hardened skeptic, if God is real, people, like to know about him. And so, people who are hardened skeptics and don't want to hear the message, hey, that's fine. I mean, they're just as valuable a citizen as I am. They're free to make their choices. When I first started, there was some pushback, as in, well, here's a novel, but it has scripture in it, and that's not really a thing. And have a good friend over in Mississippi who kind of had that, perspective, then just started reading the books and realized, hey, you can take on the way Jesus would teach through parables. You can tell stories and show timeless truths through the stories. And so, like I said, I think that people who are open to hearing the message, whether they're a believer or a non-believer, as long as they're kind of open, that's who these books are for. Because when you could remove the man-made religion and just tell a story showing biblical truth without it being shoved down your throat, I think that is attractive, and it certainly would have been to me as a young man. And I honestly believe that if this light had gone on in my spirit when I was young, my life would have looked a whole lot different. I would have been able to live it differently because I would have had an understanding, because we're born default into a pagan society with pagan thought. And, we have to find our way out of that if we're going to find out who created us and what our purpose is. So I think it's a pretty wide audience that have found enjoyment and spiritual enrichment from these books, including, like I said, through several of the books. When you read a book review from a stranger um, who gives a good book review but states that they're not a believer, yet and I have a two or three of those on my Top of the Mountain book, which is a parable or a story about real love. And when someone states that they're not a believer, yet they read a book that has 191 passages of scripture in it, including at least one passage from all 66 books of the Bible, that's a win, buddy. I'll take that every single time. And as we go through the following podcast, where we're going through some of the details of each of these books, I think the listeners and watchers can understand more of the process and hopefully see what is the truth, which is, God taking a regular, working schmuck in the trucking business and asking him to do this amazing thing. And it's an amazing thing, not because I did it. It's an amazing thing because this is what he gave me to do. And I'm just trying to be faithful. I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I am obedient. And like I said earlier, I am available to serve. And that this is a concept that applies to someone. I don't care if you are a stay-at-home mom who watches other kids as a side gig. You can serve in the kingdom with as much value as someone who is, the greatest evangelist or preacher or mega church pastor. In God's world, in God's kingdom, they're all the same. Not like in the society we live where there's a hierarchy, and if you've got a lot of money, then people listen to you, even if you're stupid. And there are a lot of foolish people out there spewing a lot of nonsense right now, but people listen to them because they have a big Twitter following or whatever. So God will lead you into what he wants you to do, that I think is a taste of what will happen forever and ever when we leave this world. I think that we're practicing now for eternity, and really we're here to make a decision. Where do we want to spend eternity? Do you want to spend it with the one who created us, or do we want to be God of our own world? Which circles us back to our whole podcast, which is not just a book concept, but it's really just our whole theme, which is farewell, my king, which is my own kingship. I'm giving up my own kingship for the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. And I am ceasing living for the cult of me, which is the world revolves around me, which circles back to one of the most powerful verses in the Bible, John 3:30. He must become greater, I must become less. That's what the podcast is about. That's what the Perspective book is about. And that's what every single one of my books is about, is dethroning ourselves, bowing to the King of Kings, not religion, not man-made religion, but bowing to the one who created us and wants us to serve as sons and daughters in the kingdom, who are co-equal in his eyes, no matter what fake news you have out there on the theology, where men dominate women, or now I think we see women trying to dominate men. There's a balance that God created. He created us for purposes. And when we live for our own purposes, he doesn't force us to serve him. He doesn't force us to love him, because coercion cannot be a part of the process of true, real love. But he does call us to surrender our kingship and serve him. And that's exactly what's happened with this whole publishing thing. And anyone who's listening now who's thought about writing a book, or you've written something and you'd like some advice, reach out to us. We're be glad to show you some of the mechanics of it, because really I'm not just an author, but I became, in 2015, when I wasn't using a company and paying high fees for something I could do on my own, I became a publisher. And, that's the publishing end of it is a whole lot more work than the writing. The writing's a nothing burger compared to the publishing, where you start editing, and it starts with, flow. And I mean, I'll do probably 7 or 8 full edits that start with fast reading. And the last edit is so tedious, it's horrible. It's word by word. Yeah, and it is so tedious. But I can tell you this, through experience, if you make a grammatical mistake, somebody's going to get thrown so far off that they're going to stop reading and hearing the content. So by the time I got to my third book, entering all of them into Writer's Digest National Book Writing Contest, I finally started getting 5 out of 5 on the grammar and all that. But it took a lot of practice. And so that's really the thing is if it's a ministry thing, or if you just want to write a book that's a murder mystery, whatever, if you're willing to sacrifice, then you might have something that could benefit people, whether it be good entertainment, or even in the case of the books, I'm always hoping that people are going to hear the gospel, that they're going to respond to it, that it's going to strengthen their faith, or open up questions to where they're going to start pursuing, because that's really what I think Jesus wants us to do, is to pursue him. And so I'd like to encourage those who are listening and watching, stay tuned for the next one as we go into the nitty-gritty details of each of the books. You'll learn where God led me on it, and how he's always sustained me, where I had early partners and mentors in as I got started, and as they moved on and started doing other things, all of a sudden he drops you into my life, who we connected with my fourth book, but now you're intimately involved with all of it. So there's a whole lot to it, and there's a whole lot of details that I want to share, because I think people are going to find inspiration from how God took a wretch like me and asked me to do something I think is pretty cool for the kingdom.
Well, amen. Well, thank you everyone for taking your time out of your day to listen to us. All them questions that you have about self-publishing, the gospel, whatever it is, farewellmyking@gmail.com. You can find Wade on Amazon. Just search for his name and search his name, Wade J. Carey, and all his titles come up. Please like our Facebook page. That's where you get a free taste of the book every Monday and Tuesday, and you get to be assassinated by Wally and his shenanigans on Wednesdays. That's where we do the free book on Fridays. If for 4 Fridays every month, we give away a book, and then we do some just remind people that Kindle Unlimited is all the titles are available on Kindle Unlimited. So,
and if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe,
please,
because we
thank
got
you
a
so
lot of good
much.
information coming that is encouraging. You're going to hear a lot of spiritual things. You're going to hear a lot of things about the publishing, and it's a pretty interesting story as we go along. So like and subscribe, stay tuned. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up for you.
Well, thank you, Wade. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Say farewell to that king of yourself and start killing the cult of you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.